Good afternoon and welcome to the South Dakota Healthy Nutrition Collaborative's Lunch and Learn webinar series. Before we begin with our speaker, I'd just like to give an overview of the collaborative's purpose and goals. So the purpose of the South Dakota Healthy Nutrition Collaborative is to bring a collective voice to support access to nutritious food, which builds a strong foundation for healthy South Dakota families and communities to prosper. We're organized into 3 goal groups. One is to improve coordination, identify areas for statewide research and evaluation, and promote programmatic best practices to improve South Dakotans' food, nutrition, and security. The next is to elevate the voices of food nutrition advocates, researchers, and individuals experiencing food nutrition insecurity. And the last is to advance policy implementation to improve food nutrition and security in South Dakota. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Deb Fischer-Clemens. She will go ahead and just give a little background, and I will go ahead and share her slides.
Well, thanks, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. I'm hoping you're going to have a great day, and hopefully this is a part of that great day. So I am a registered nurse and have been for many years. Spent 25 years in nurse management in Mitchell. During that time, I spent 6 years in the South Dakota legislature, elected 3 times. And after that, so I was done in the legislature in the year 2000, a long time ago. And then Avera became Avera in 2000. And so I was asked by leadership if I would create the Avera Center for Public Policy. So in 2002, because I couldn't lobby in 2001, I started working in the role of the lobbyist for Avera, and then in 2002 actually, and created the Avera Center, and actually lobbied then our state of South Dakota, but also Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota a little bit, and then all of our federal delegation as well. And so I do have a bit of experience in lobbying, which I actually don't like that term. I prefer the term advocacy and advocate. So with that, I will start my presentation. And just the first thing I want to say is all humans are political. And I've never thought that so much, but I've thought it more and more as I've grown. And we try every day as individuals to influence others on our beliefs, values, and knowledge. So that's what makes us political, is that we are always influencing. So what is advocacy, or what is an advocate? Is one who pleads, defends, or supports a cause or the interest of another. And it has a role of working on behalf of self and or others to raise awareness of a concern and to promote solutions to the issue. One final thing before I move on to the rest to my PowerPoint is the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal is advocacy. Seeing a need and finding a way to address it. That is advocacy based on the Merriam-Webster online dictionary. So with that, Jennifer, if you want to slide to the opening slide there. So we're going to talk about the legislative makeup. How do you find your legislators? What is the legislative process beginning to end? Providing testimony and tips for making an impact at the Capitol and at home. Next. Okay, so decisions are made by those who show up. So like I said, we are all political in the sense that we advocate every day for something, whether that's a school situation for your children, whether that's something at work where you're advocating on behalf of, in my world, a patient or a provider or the system itself. And if you want to move forward here. Very good. So our legislature in South Dakota is made up of 35 legislative districts. Each district represents approximately 25,000 voters, which is why if you look at a map of the districts, you see that Sioux Falls has, I don't remember, 9, 10 districts because of our population here. Each district has 1 senator and 2 representatives. There are 35 members in the Senate, 70 members in the House, and that because of those numbers. They each serve in South Dakota 2-year terms. So they're up for election. Every member of our legislature is up for election every 2 years, which will again happen in 26. So in the 25 session, we had 32 Republican senators, 3 Democrat senators, 64 Republican representatives, and 6 Democrat representatives. I would tell you that when I was in the legislature, like I said, many years ago, back in the late 90s, we had 23 Democrats in the House. And I want to say we had 12 or 14 in the Senate. And I would tell you that the world is very different today, in the sense that, like, I served with Senator Rounds, I served with Dugard, I served in the Janko administration. So it was just very different in the sense of how we got things done than I think it is today. We had a lot of negotiations of people, but when the numbers are like they were when I was there, there was a lot better negotiations. I think that's a challenge these days. And I've been lobbying, like I said, up until, last year I was not in Pierre. That would have been my 31st year of being in Pierre, and opted not to. But 30 years of being in Pierre, working with all of the secretaries and the governor and the governor's staff, et cetera. So I've had a bit of experience. So next slide. So each member each chamber elects their leadership. So there's a Speaker of the House, and that person is a House member only. And this year that was John Hanson. They also elect a Speaker pro tem, which is the person who would cover if the Speaker wants to testify or has a bill, et cetera. Then we have a majority leader, an assistant majority leader, a minority leader, and an assistant minority leader, and then whips. And whips are folks that are elected by the caucus, and they are assigned a group of individual legislators that they will make sure that they are kept informed what's happening within the leadership and what the leadership is working on, what they see as important bills. Each whip has a group of persons that they keep educated on what's happening. Next slide. So we have, I think it's 13 committees. They're all listed here. The majority leader, minority leader, and the pro tem determine who will be members of each committee. And in the House, that's 13 to 15 members. And in the Senate, that is 5, 7, or 9. Always an odd number, just to make sure you have the way to vote that and break a tie. Every chair is appointed and every vice chair is appointed. Now, these legislators can say, hey, I want to be on these 2 committees. In the House, it's typically 2 committees that meet on during the session every other day. In the Senate, they would be on 3 different committees, just because of the numbers and how that works. Retirement laws does not meet all the time. That is one that meets a couple times during session, but not every other day like the others do. The other one of those is military and veterans affairs. That doesn't meet all the time. And so, but like Health and Human Services, the Education Committee, they are every other day. Our session starts the second Tuesday of January and goes through the middle of March. It's either a 38, 39, 40-day session. And the committee chairs set the agenda every day, and we see at least in a minimum 400 bills, but usually 500 bills. And in South Dakota, different from some other states, every bill does get a hearing, so that everybody who wants to advocate can. And so I see that as a really important position to take, that every bill does get a hearing. And I'll let you go to the next slide. So this lays out how you can find your legislators. And I would tell you that South Dakota has one of the best websites, working with a few other states in the past. They have the easiest website to get through. So this tells you how to find your legislators, but I would just tell you that committees are, you can find the committee on it for the given day, or even go back now to, if you wanted to listen to testimony from the Education Committee back during session, and you wanted to hear what a specific legislator said, you actually can go back into the website and find that testimony. listen to it. It's just really, and during session, you truly can listen to and hear the testimony. You can testify. During COVID, they were able to figure out how to make sure that people who wanted to testify could. So they've kind of held on to that. You do have to notify the chair or the Legislative Research Council. I think it's 24, maybe it's 24 hours before the committee. We do move very rapidly, where a bill might be, you might hear about a bill on Monday, and by Wednesday, it's already been assigned and it's going to be heard on Wednesday. Where it's usually all the notice you get, the minimal notice you'll get is 24 hours before a bill comes up. And so it's one of the really important things that needs to happen, in that if you're going to be testifying, you need to be tracking the bill based on its number or based on the legislator who's bringing it forward. So I'll let you go to the next slide. Okay, the process. Let's go with process. I would just tell you that we truly do in South Dakota have a great process, I believe. There's 5 steps to it. So legislation always begins with an idea or a problem that needs to be solved. And that can come from you saying to a legislator, hey, I think we need to do this. I think we need to fix this. I've got some ideas on how to do that. And it is a matter of fact that our legislators, because we are a citizen legislature, they all have other jobs, professions, life that they live even while they're in the legislature. So they typically are pretty well versed on 1, 2, maybe 3 subjects until they're educated about that. And so grassroots advocacy really is a very effective tool in education. And I would say that 2 of the most important parts of this are developing a relationship with the legislator. That is critical. We need to be friends. We need to be friendly. And the fact that you are their constituent. And so members of the legislature typically are very responsive to their constituents. And I would say that's one of the important things, that if you are reaching out to a legislator, you want to develop a relationship with a legislator within your district. So they know your name, they know what your profession is, they know what you are interested in. And that typically I would encourage is a face-to-face. And they're having meetings and they're out and about, they're in our communities. That's why they're called a citizen legislature. Even if they're at the grocery store, you can walk up to them and say, hi, my name is, I'd like to get to talk to you at some point about a couple of things I have ideas about. How can I set up a time to meet with you? And always be that way, that it's not stopping them from what they're doing. And I would say that the members respect and use it as a barometer for popular actions. If they're hearing from several people within their district, that's even more important. So legislator engagement. So once the stakeholder has provided some information, so education of a legislator is critical. What I found when I was in the legislature, I was actually the only nurse. And what I found is that I was the person who got asked a lot of questions about healthcare. And that it's true of every person there. Their background is what leads them to serve on the different committees, and they are the voice of the legislature many times on a specific issue. So you go to a legislator, and they right now, when a legislator is going to bring legislation or work on that, they in fact have to be the one that requests it from the Legislative Research Council. They have to provide the information. It's the legislator that does. It used to be that anybody could throw their information out there to the Legislative Research Council. They would go through all this work to draft it, but they didn't have a legislator who would be prime for that. So once the Legislative Research Council has actually drafted, worked on, then it's sponsor selection. And that can kind of happen if you are the stakeholder that's involved in this. You can be talking with people about, would you like to be a part of this bill? Would you be willing to sign on to it once we get it drafted? and so I've been working with someone on a bill, and we've met with a group of legislators individually, most of them. And our last question always is, now that you've heard this information, is this something that you are interested in and would be willing to be a sponsor of? And then you talk about who would you be willing to be a prime sponsor, because every bill has to have a House and a Senate prime sponsor that's going to bring the legislation in the committee. Like I said, it's the leadership that determines what committee it goes to. Sometimes people try, and I have in the past tried to make sure it goes to a committee that I've already talked to everyone, or that I really believe they're the ones who will know and understand this particular legislation. So as I mentioned before, every bill does get a hearing. So if you've got a prime sponsor that is in a representative, they would be at the House committee gets the hearing first, and they, if they approve the bill, it moves on to the floor and gets debated. And if it approves there, the Senate committee, so your prime that's in the Senate would be taking that to committee once it's assigned, and approval there takes it to a Senate floor debate. And after that, if it's all good, no changes, et cetera, it's off to the governor for signature. Now, there are bills that can be adjustments made, and then they could be heard again, and they would be heard again in both chambers if there's agreement to do that. And then if the governor does veto a bill, says, hey, we just are not going to do this, the override or you can override that governor's position. And that is usually we have a veto day 2 weeks after session ends, but there are some vetoes that are dealt with actually during the session. So just let me talk a little bit about, you need to, if you're going to work on a bill that you really is important to you, you need to develop a clear statement of position. What is it in 1 or 2 sentences that you truly are working to accomplish? And then you need to use supporting data and put numbers in human terms. How does this affect people? You provide verbal, written, and electronic forms of that information as the progress moves on. Typically, this is before session, but it also goes on during session. Be fact-based and consistent, and everybody that you have involved needs to be of the same facts and the same consistency. It's always helpful, I think, and I did it a lot when I was testifying, is to tell a story that expresses the impact. Always ensure confidentiality if you're talking about an individual, and that was really key being in the healthcare profession, is sharing life experiences of people, and then but being sure not to give any information away that would jeopardize people knowing who had shared the story. Okay, let's see the next slide here. I've got a couple other things. So committee testimony. So like I said, every bill gets a hearing. Every hearing allows pro-opponent and opponent testimony. Now, what I would say about that, it used to be that committee meetings might run overtime. That has changed. If it's a bill that they believe if there's a room full of people there and this is a bill that everybody wants to testify on, the chair of the committee usually, always, says, all right, I'm going to take 20 minutes of proponent testimony and 20 minutes of opponent testimony, and they're serious. They're timing it. And so they don't want to hear any repeats. So people who have prepared testimony need to listen to what the other person is saying so that they don't repeat. Because if you've got 15 people that want to testify and you get 15 minutes, each person gets 1 minute. And you got to hurry to get up to the front of the room because your time is starting. So anyway, it's big, tough bills. Typically, not everybody gets to testify. But if you are one of those people who wants to be very specific about who gets to testify on your bill, you need to make sure they understand that they have their 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, and then the next person should not repeat anything. So testimony may be in person or remotely, as I said. Needs to be factual, to the point. Testimony rarely wins the day for a bill, but it can cause a bill to fail. So rarely does it win the day, but it can certainly cause a bill to fail when someone gets somewhat angry in how they're testifying, and angry is a strong word because you typically don't do that, but if they're not sharing factual, appropriate information and not in an appropriate way, the committee can see that as we're not going to be a part of this. So following testimony from proponents and opponents, legislators may ask questions. It is okay to say you do not know. It's better to follow up with the accurate information than to be inaccurate. So at the conclusion of the hearing, the committee will decide if the bill moves further in the process. And I want to see the next slide. I can't remember for sure. I've done so many of these. There we go. So if the committee supports the bill, a motion is made to move it to the floor for debate. And that's a motion to do pass. It's a motion or a motion to do pass as amended if they did amend it in committee. And it's a motion to move to the floor without recommendation also can happen, which says that they don't all agree with the bill, but they do believe that it should be heard by other members of the legislature. If the committee does not support the bill, a motion is made to kill it. And that happens, the motion to move to the 41st day, because we only have a max of 40 days. So the motion to move to the 41st day is a way to kill the bill. They can move to table it, which means that if they have a majority of folks later down the road, or they've gotten more information and they have a majority of the committee who agrees that they should discuss this further, they can take the bill off the table. They can also move to a do not pass, but that would mean that it could potentially go to the floor for hearing, where they're going to have some testimony out on the floor. But the committee itself has moved to do not pass. And so in all of these situations, depending on what the motion is, determines how you as the advocate is going to work on this. So of course you want a motion to do pass, but that means you've just gotten 13 or whatever the committee number is to agree. You need to pay attention to who voted against it. And then your work is cut out for you to go talk to the other 65 legislators, explain to them what you're working on, why you're working on it, and make sure to share that it did pass out of committee by this vote. If it didn't pass out of committee, you typically can talk to a few people, but it's likely not going to get brought back or be discussed again during this session. Sometimes there's work that gets done in the other chamber that totally shifts the bill language so that it could be something you still support, but it isn't quite the way you wanted it. That can happen at times, but that also requires a lot of work. I would mention here that lobbyists are a big part of our legislature. Many companies, businesses hire, and even from outside of the state of South Dakota, employ a lobbyist to be there if there's a bill that has some kind of would do something to impact your business or the role. So for example, my role was to lobby on behalf of healthcare, but very specifically for Avera. And so talking on behalf of Avera and what their policy positions were and are. So I'll go to the next slide, but there's some other stuff I want to share. Okay, bills that are approved by committee are then debated on the floors. To pass a bill, that bill must receive at least 37 votes in the House and 18 votes in the Senate. So it's really important to talk to the other members, identifying who might be supportive so you can get your 37 votes. Bills that spend money or have an emergency clause, the emergency clause means they go into effect immediately. That's part of a bill sometimes, that they would go into effect as soon as the governor signs it. Those bills, money and emergency clause, must have a 2/3 majority vote in each chamber. That's 47 votes in the House and 24 votes in the Senate to do that. Those are some tough things to have happen, but so that means as an advocate on behalf of your bill, it's moved through the process to that point, but you still have to get, as I said, 37 or 18 on just a regular vote, and emergency or money is a 2/3 majority. So there are a variety of procedural moves that can be made to delay a vote on a bill or attempt to defeat it. A 517 rule on amendments just stops debate. No more discussion. You can't, no, if you're up on the floor, if they're up on the floor testifying and someone moves a 517, not another word can be said in front of all those folks. Fiscal notes are typically required of something that individuals see as a cost to the state. And that delays the bill debate until they see what the fiscal analysis looks like and what it might cost, or maybe it doesn't. And like I mentioned, you can try and get a re-referral to a different committee if it's not going as you need to work with a legislator to get that accomplished. So it's always important to, as I said, develop a relationship with a legislator and or 2 or 3. And as you get to the legislative session, you definitely want to develop a relationship with the chair of the committee that your bill is being taken to. And you want to be sure that you truly understand the draft of the legislation. There's sometimes when it gets drafted that just because of the rules of the state or the agency that might be impacted by it, it might have some wording that you need to be really sure you understand how it works. So let's go to the next slide. So making an impact. So as I said in the beginning, decisions are made by those who show up. Engage in organizations working on causes and issues you care about. That's part of why I'm speaking today, because the South Dakota Healthy Nutrition Collaborative, at this point, we have not taken positions on bills. We are in the process of educating lots of people about the work that we do, what our beliefs and strengths and philosophies are in regards to feeding, making sure that there is food security across our state. And so that's an important part of all of this, as we have 40 plus organizations that are a part of our Healthy Nutrition Collaborative. It may be that there's a piece of legislation that not every organization or that is 100% supportive of the whatever the bill says, and maybe so that's why we have not, as a group, decided to take positions on bills yet. We need to make sure that we are providing people with information so that they know the things we're working on, and hopefully people can support. So, I mean, there's always situations when you're parts of big groups where maybe the wording doesn't make 100% of support for your group. So you need to know the issues better than anyone else. You need to be the expert. So that's what this group is doing, is being the expert on healthy nutrition and food insecurity. And I would just tell you that my experience in the last few years dealing with some of the food insecurity issues, there are legislators who truly do not understand what that means. So my estimation at this point is we have a lot of work ahead of us to educate folks about what food insecurity means, what food security means, and how people are impacted, and particularly children, how children are impacted based on the fact that they are food insecure. There's absolutely, I had a legislator say to me one day, I don't even know how the term food insecurity, what it means. So we have work to do. So it is okay to say you don't know during testimony or conversations, but always, always follow up with accurate information. You always want to make connections with legislators before you need to engage them. That is really important. And again, that's why I would say the bill that I'm helping someone with right now, I reached out to legislators that know me. And there's a whole, like I said, I wasn't in Pure this last year. There's a group of new legislators I don't know. They don't know me. So if I call them and say, hey, you know, I'm working on this. Before I do that, I need to talk to them a bit about who I am and what I have done. What's my background? What gives me the ability and the willingness to talk about this particular issue? And then give them an opportunity to ask questions of you as to who you are and why you are wanting this. But you do want to work with organizations. You want to know your issue better than anyone. You can make calls, send texts, send emails on topics, but you want to have a relationship with a couple legislators before you start doing that. And I always tell people that if you're going to engage by email, you need to be very clear in the subject line that you are a constituent that lives in there. Somehow make it so that they know that you are one of their people, because they get emails from all over the country on certain issues. So we want to make sure that in the subject line, your first statement is, I am a constituent in your district I live at. Then as you start your messaging, your first line is, I support, I oppose, I'm asked, I want your support on the bill number or this issue, and be very clear in that first sentence what you are asking for. And then don't make a long email. You give them a couple of lines of information. You ask them to please call you as you're looking for their support in your position, or you ask if you could call them and what would be a good opportunity to do that. So again, you make connections with legislators before you need to engage. So at the grocery store, at church, on the street, you want to run up and say, hey, shake their hand, and so thankful that you're in the legislature. I've got a subject that I want to visit with you about at some point in time. So again, and I will have you go to the next. Okay, very good. Let's see, what else have I not talked about here? So just as in summary, I guess I would say that despite the complexity of modern politics, one thing remains true today as it was when government was conceived. Legislators do listen to their constituents. Nothing makes an impact like hearing from local constituents. And then encouraging the passage, defeat, or modification of specific legislation, as I said, is called lobbying, a term going back to England, when those seeking to influence elected officials gathered in the great lobby outside of Parliament. So everyone can lobby. As a citizen acting on your own interests, you are able to contact your legislator at any time to express your views on a particular issue. Just develop a relationship and spend your time in educating them about the issue. With that, I'll take questions.